Ladies and gentlemen, Gold Coast Waves Entertainment is very proud to present Gold Logie winner, the true king of TV game show hosting, and Australian TV royalty, Mr. Tony Barber. Good morning, Tony, and thank you for coming onto our show. How are you this morning?
You find me in a state of disarray, I think is the word, between the coronavirus and having purchased a new Android mobile phone, the mechanics of which I'm not used to, and so I've been having a bit of trouble. But apart from that, I'm in pretty good health, and that's all we can hope for these days.
That's great to hear, Tony. You've got such a list of shows that you've hosted that were absolutely loved. Wheel of Fortune, Side of the Century, Family Feud, Great Temptation, Jeopardy, of course, being a Gold Logie winner. Can you tell us a bit about how you started in television and broadcasting?
Yes, well, I guess I started in Western Australia, where I was working at the Scarborough Public Library, and I joined the local repertory club and got a part in a play, and our producer-director happened to be the program manager of the Whitford's Broadcasting Network. And one day he said to me, look, you're quite good at this stage work, but have you ever thought of a career in radio? And I said, well, no, not really. He said, I think you'd be fine. We're auditioning for a cadet announcer on our station in Geraldton. Geraldton, by the way, is some considerable mileage north of Perth, up on the west coast, 6GE Geraldton. So I said, yes, I'll audition. So I did, and got the job. So I jumped in my little Austin Healey Sprite and drove north and established myself at the station. The first day I walked in, one of the other guys was working the desk, and in those days, I mean, you had 6 turntables, and you were playing 45 discs for music, and of course for commercials and everything else. Reading live copy, taking phone calls from the manager's wife who was complaining, and I just thought to myself, my God, I'll never do this. Anyway, within 48 hours, I was doing it. And in no time at all, I was the new breakfast man, which I love because I've always been a morning person.
Right.
And, things were great. So from there, I was offered a promotion to the city station was 6 p.m. Perth. So next thing, I'm in Perth. I used to sing in those days, still do occasionally if you don't watch me. And I was doing the show on the radio, singing in the pubs, and generally making a career for myself. And then I left Perth, much against the advice of my parents and everybody that knew me. But in those days, if you were in the West, you could only go so far in show business. The action was really on the East Coast. So daring young man left Perth and went east. And practically, I was virtually unemployed for a couple of years, just sort of hoping to get something, looking for things. And then I sort of switched courses and decided to use my experience selling radio advertising in Geraldton.
Right.
To work in an advertising agency, which I did. And whilst there, I cast myself as the central figure in a cigarette commercial. Some of your listeners might recall Cambridge cigarettes.
Yes.
It was a dashing young chap, me, marching down Martin Place before it was the Plaza, and whistling and stopping at a kiosk and buying a packet of this new brand of cigarettes, lighting up and moving on. And it was an enormous success. The brand took off, and they sold millions and millions in the first couple of months. And God knows how many people I've killed. But that's where I was noticed by a Mr. Bruce Gingell, who was then running the 7 network.
Oh, yes.
And Grundy's had approached him with an idea for a quiz show called Temptation. And so they were auditioning people. And Bruce, in his wisdom and foresight, said, well, why don't you try this young fellow that does the whistling? He was in the Navy, and he's a nice type of bloke. See how he goes. So I auditioned, and blow me down, got the job. And, I'm tempted to say the rest is show business history. But it was terribly successful in daytime, so much so they moved it to nighttime and increased the prize money. And dear old Barbie Rogers and I, we became national figures. I got my face on the front of magazines, and that was it. That was the kickoff.
Right.
And then things went a bit quiet. At one stage, they dropped the show, and I went back to the West, licking my wounds. And then in no time at all, Grundy's were back on the doorstep, wanting me to be in a show called Family Feud.
Oh, yes.
So, having got used to being in the limelight, as it were, I said, yes, please. So then I came back east with Family Feud, came back to Melbourne, and before long, the 9 Network decided that they could do a remake of Temptation.
Right.
And call it by its original name, which was Sale of the Century.
Wow.
So then I landed there, and that was another 10 or 12 years constant employment.
Yes, I loved that show very much. And remember yourself and your lovely assistant, Elise Platt? Most folks, I'm sure, loved it. It was a tremendous show.
You know, I had Elise, of course, was the more contemporary one. Before her, people will remember Victoria Nichols, and before Victoria, they'll probably remember Barbara Rogers. So you might say I was well adorned with beautiful and attractive assistants.
I believe you are currently involved in a production called Senior Moments, your comedy review.
Well, of course, we were halted. It's a terrific show, a great production, live stage show, of course. What people used to call a review, but very cleverly written, brilliant stuff. And myself and Max and a whole group of very talented young people. So we were lucky. We managed to get the Sydney season, the Brisbane season, the Adelaide season. We managed to get the Perth season all in before the virus struck. Unfortunately, we missed Melbourne, which would have been terrific for us because most of us live here. It was a lot of fun. A real old-fashioned review. Funny lines. Who was that lady I saw you with last night? That was no lady. That was my wife. All that sort of stuff.
Yep. And apparently Ron Howard and Normie Rowe, were to appear in that one as well.
Normie didn't make it.
Yep.
I forget what happened. I think he had a prior engagement or something got confused with his management. John Howard, of course, not the John Howard,
Yes.
not the political John Howard,
Yep.
but the fabulous thespian John Howard,
Right.
who was marvellous fun. And we had a great time, because it wasn't a long show, usually finished 10:30, and Howard, Gillies and Barber all seemed to enjoy a good nosh.
Mm-hmm.
So we enjoyed all these wonderful restaurants around the country. It was fabulous.
Oh, that's excellent. Tony, if I may ask you, what were one of your defining moments that you can remember, in TV history?
Well, I suppose you'd have to say the Gold Logie,
Mm-hmm.
which was and still is, the prime. It has its critics, because it's a coupon thing. People fill in a magazine voting coupon. And so it's always had a little bit of, if you can convince enough of your friends to buy the magazine.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I always say, well, it's only an award, but it's television's only award. It's the only one that sort of congratulates a personality for their work.
Yes, that's...
Well, I'm very pleased to have it, and I'm sitting here staring at it right now, along with the silver one. Pity we didn't have pictures. I could just hold up there.
Well, that's correct. Well, perhaps you can get somebody to take a photograph, and we can present that as part of our presentation.
I'll send it to you.
Wonderful.
Ah.
Is there any role that you haven't performed in as yet that you'd like to, perhaps in the future?
I tell you, I always yearned to go back to live theatre.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
in the, I think it was the mid-90s, at some stage anyway, I managed to get myself cast as Geraldine Turner's opposite number
Yes.
in a musical.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have been terrific, and we got within a week of the opening, and the whole thing fell through. Great shame.
Oh, my.
But that's life. That's the show business life.
Yes.
But I still enjoy a bit of live work. I do a lot of, a fair bit of commercial work. A company
Yes.
might want to entertain its clients.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do a quiz night or perhaps a musical appearance. So I keep my hand in, if you know what I mean.
That's wonderful to hear, Tony.
Well, I think it's terribly important for, in this day and age, for septuagenarians, and now, of course, having turned 80 on March 28th, octogenarians, we can't give in. We can't give in to the seniority. We've got to keep at it.
Absolutely.
If I could ask right at the beginning, why is it that you chose your profession?
Well, look, I think the genesis was, I was born in England in 1940.
Right.
So the first 7 years of my life were in a little place called Chatterton in Lancashire, England.
Right.
And it was a funny life because in those days we had one little street, Wellington Street, and in that street I had 3 or 4 real aunties, 2 sets of grandparents,
Yes.
and everybody else in the street you called auntie or uncle.
Right.
And I used to enjoy to sing. As my mother used to say, oh, he's a bright little lad. I used to like singing and remembering poems from the school, reciting and so forth.
Yes.
So really, from a very early age, and especially at what I call Auntie Alice's piano, the whole family would gather and have a sing-song. And I was occasionally sorted out to do a solo. So, I sort of got used to that idea
Yes.
of entertaining people, and I like the applause. I like the receptions.
Yep. Yep.
So that was it for me, yes.
That's excellent. Would you believe that I still have some of your CDs, I believe, from back in that time?
Well, a lot of people think, he got to be a television quizmaster, and all of a sudden he's turned himself into a singer. But actually, I was the boy soprano champion of all of Western Australia back in the day. Stedfords and so forth.
No, that's superb. Really excellent. Have there been any difficult roles, on TV, anything else like that?
Well, there's been, difficult times, as anyone who works in the entertainment business will tell you, particularly, for instance, at the moment. But really, you have your highs, which are exhilarating, and occasionally your lows. When they finally abandoned Sale of the Century, for instance, took it off, and various other shows. You have these times, ups and downs.
Yes.
But I wouldn't have done it any differently. I think I've been an extremely lucky little boy soprano.
You certainly have been. On behalf of Oya Wilson and myself, we'd like to thank you so much for coming onto our show today and speaking to our listeners, Tony.
Totally my pleasure, and give my best wishes to Oya and everybody up there.